This week on the Carolina Weather Group, we're talking to that guy right there. Michael Lowry returns to the Carolina Weather Group. We're going to talk about the hurricane season outlook and some of the current staffing at the National Weather Service and what that might mean, how that could impact us as we head into what the Weather Service predicts to be an active hurricane season. You're watching the Carolina Weather Group live for this Wednesday, June the 4th, 2025. Let's roll the open. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. With me on my Carolina Weather Group panel this week, we got Frank Strait in Columbia, South Carolina, and Sam Walker out on the Outer Banks. Gentlemen, good to see you tonight. As I mentioned, our guest, Michael Lowry, is a hurricane expert for WPLG television in Miami. And Michael, if I remember, your resume includes time at the Weather Channel and at the National Hurricane Center. So you're a great person to bring on here as we are in our first week of hurricane season. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to be with you guys.
Oh, thank you very much for making time for us and our audience. We are looking forward to talking to you because you are uniquely positioned not only to give us your expertise and what we can expect in this 2025 hurricane season, but you'll have some insights on what it's like behind the scenes and what some of the headlines that we're reading might mean for us. But we're going to start this week with our own Frank Strait in Columbia because, Frank, the hurricane season is starting off with what was until moments ago a little yellow blob off the Carolina coast. What's the latest on our tropical season outlook right now?
Yeah, James, the atmosphere is sending a little bit of a warning shot at us here at the Carolinas right now. A little plume of tropical moistures surging northward associated with an upper level low that's sitting over the southeastern states. There was some outside concern that this could become a tropical cyclone, likely staying a weak one, but instead it looks as though any area of low pressure that forms will be staying over land, and so we do not have any concern for any kind of tropical development here. I just realized I need to share my screen with you so that I can actually show you the graphics I want to show you. So there we go, James. And now James actually has access to the Hurricane Center's website, which is telling us now that tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days.
Oh, that's late
whereas
breaking
previously
news.
we had that little 10% outside chance of something coming out of this little blob of tropical moisture that's coming our way right now. So let's switch over to the satellite view to show you how things look from outer space right now. And you can see there is a cluster of thunderstorms over and just offshore of the Carolinas associated with this little disturbance. You can see the turning motion associated with that upper level low that's off to our southwest right now. That disturbance is going to be pushing northeastward through tomorrow and eventually through the Carolinas and out to sea. And again, it's mostly going to stay over land on its way, so it looks like we won't see any kind of tropical development. Here's how the radar looks. Things are settling down a little bit now that we've lost daytime heating as we go through the evening hours here. So the showers and thunderstorms we had fairly widespread over South Carolina earlier are diminishing now. It looks as though Friday, or rather Thursday, is going to be a better day for showers and thunderstorms up in North Carolina, but you'll see a little bit of rain and potentially a thunderstorm tonight in the Tar Heel State from that. So let's take a quick look at computer models. And this is actually hot off the presses, the latest HER model, which unfortunately doesn't go out far enough. It's the 0Z run, and based off of data from zero, what we used to call Greenwich Mean Time. The current time, Carolina Weather Group time is 0112Z, 9:12 p.m.
Your AccuWeather days are coming back to you, Frank.
Yes, absolutely. Going back to my days on WCBS in New York there. But anyway, switching back a little bit here, we'll look here at the HER model from 18Z that initialized off of 2 p.m. Eastern time data, which shows some showers and thunderstorms mostly along and east of I-77 during the afternoon hours tomorrow. Local downpours are a threat. It's unlikely we see any severe weather. Can't totally rule that out, but it's highly unlikely. If anybody saw anything, it would be just locally damaging wind. Can't rule out a waterspout along the coastal waters in North Carolina tomorrow. We did have one or two off of South Carolina's waters today, but none of that activity came ashore. So We didn't have any tornadoes on land to deal with. Of concern, though, the reason this low is getting pushed away is because of an approaching cold front. As you can see, this is tomorrow evening, Thursday evening on the GFS model from 18Z, weak area low pressure out by Sam's territory out there and on its way out to sea at that point. But you can see a little band of showers and thunderstorms. Whoops, hit the wrong button there. It's a band of showers and thunderstorms associated with the front moving in from the northwest. That gets to us on Friday, it looks like. Later Friday into Friday night, and then especially into Saturday, we'll see some showers and thunderstorms. Storm Prediction Center is a little concerned about that for Friday night, potentially some gusty thunderstorms getting into the Carolinas, a little marginal risk there. The slight risk area just clipping far western North Carolina. Then the day 4 area does allow for some severe in western North Carolina and almost all of South Carolina. So we'll have to be on the lookout there for some gusty storms with that front moving through Friday night into Saturday, James.
It's springtime. It's hurricane season. It is keeping us on our toes. We know we had some severe weather roll through the Carolinas last Friday with hail and considerable degree thunderstorms. So we'll wait to see exactly what this severe weather chance materializes onto on Saturday. And of course, we'll have severe weather alerts streaming on our YouTube channel. Just check out the Carolina Weather Group for our Carolina Weather Net, which streams live time warnings around the clock. Thank you for that update, Frank. And Michael, last week, Frank gave us a great breakdown of the NOAA outlook, which came out just in the past week or so. And already it seems like, bam, the very first week of hurricane season is, what was that 10% chance of development off the Carolina coast? And I feel like the Carolinas is already kind of, after Helene, sitting on the edge of our seats. And so to immediately put us into a bullseye was really kind of ringing the alarm bell that it is hurricane season.
Yeah, not the first place you want to see after last hurricane season for sure. I know everybody's jumpy before any hurricane season, but particularly after you're hit by such a catastrophic hurricane like the Carolinas saw last year, it was really incredible. We were talking before I came on that I spent some time up there in March shooting some stories for our annual hurricane special, and visited all of the hardest hit areas. DOT taking us into Bat Cave and Chimney Rock. These are some of the areas that you see right here, and I was floored at the scope of the damage and then the terrain that had been affected, the landslides. These are areas that I visit yearly. I go up to Asheville. My wife and I do on a at least once a year basis. In fact, we were supposed to be up in the area the week that week before Helene hit. It's really horrible to see the areas that I know pretty well and what's happened there, but resilient community there.
Yes.
And the volunteers that have come in, and but I know they're still hurting though.
Still hurting, and they are looking forward, especially the Chimney Rock community, to welcoming tourists back sometime this summer. An exact date to be announced. We know much of Asheville has their arms wide open, waiting for the summer season to start. And so we certainly wish them the best and look forward to bringing our show back up there too, following some of these images we were able to capture during their Christmas market in December. Michael, for anybody who maybe missed our show last week or hasn't yet caught up on the NOAA hurricane outlook, can you bring us up to speed on what NOAA and experts like yourself are predicting for the 2025 hurricane season?
Let me see if I can actually get you a graphic on that on the outlook. So the NOAA outlook is calling for an above average, 60% chance of an above average hurricane season in terms of the overall numbers. And that's pretty much in line with look, you have it right there. I didn't even pull it up on my screen. 13, 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes. Average is in these categories is 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, 3 category 3 are stronger hurricanes. Colorado State did 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes. So they're pretty consistent with what NOAA had put out. It's interesting kind of going into this year because it's not a slam dunk necessarily. Going into the last hurricane season, it was hard to see anything but a really gangbusters hurricane season, which we ultimately had. It was kind of a strange year because we had that mid-season lull. The good thing that we're seeing right now is that the Atlantic has cooled tremendously relative to where it was. I mean, it's still warm, but it's kind of right in the average zone right now. And in fact, before it came on tonight, I was reading a new paper that was just put out in Nature, talking about the unprecedented marine heat wave that we saw across the Atlantic in 2023, and some of the factors behind that. But really, the driving factor was the slackening up of the trade winds and reducing the ocean mixing and the warming up. But we've seen stronger trade winds this year. And look, there you go. That's a good graphic there.
Well, I was going to say, you were just reading a publication. This from one of your own publications. We reached
Yes.
out to you after reading your Substack,
There you go.
and as you were talking, I was like, wait, I got this available to screen share here. So tell us a little bit about what you wrote about here. I know you've had blog entries, newsletter entries since this May 22nd one, but this was right as the outlook was coming out, and then we'll get into some of the staffing things. But let me allow you to continue on some of these factors you're watching.
Yeah, so that's a great chart that you're seeing there. You can see last 2023 and 2024 how much higher the anomalies were, how relative to the averages, how much higher the sea surface temperatures was across the main development region there in the eastern part of the Atlantic. And then 2025, first part of the year, things have really cooled down, where we're pretty much average across the MDR right now going into the hurricane season. Average is not necessarily, which it's not below average, but it's far below what it was. And again, if you go down to the map just below that, you can see the difference in the sea surface temperatures between last May and this May, and how much cooler they are in really across, even into the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, in some of the Gulf of Mexico. So that's to me that one of the biggest stories going into the season is how much cooler the MDR is. Now the models, if you look out, the multi-model consensus still is showing that the MDR is going to be at least slightly above average for the peak months of the season for August, September, and October. It doesn't look like, we certainly don't look like we're going to have any El Nino issues in the Eastern Pacific, which would deter activity in the Atlantic. I don't know. We'll probably stay cool neutral into the hurricane season, but that's enough. That's good enough. In terms of get above average activity. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really. The total numbers don't really matter so much as where the storms form and where they go, and that's something we can't tell this far out. But and there's the plot there. We had a little bit of warming into March and April across the Eastern Equatorial Pacific, and things kind of just leveling off going into the hurricane season. That's kind of where we stand right now. Just a little cool neutral.
I just put a link in our comments for those of you watching live with us on Facebook and YouTube. If you want to check out this blog post or any of other Michael's posts on his Substack, that link is for you in the comments right now. Michael, you're back on the. Oh, go ahead.
No, I would say the one last thing I would mention though is the Gulf of Mexico is very warm right now. It's second warmest going into the hurricane season that we've seen it on record. That doesn't. The Gulf, we don't use the Gulf as a measure of how busy the Atlantic could be. There's not really a good correlation, or any correlation for that matter, between how warm the Gulf is and how overall active the hurricane season will be. But if the Gulf stays warm, that's problematic, right? Because if a storm gets in the Gulf, it has more fuel. There's potential for heavier rainfall, that sort of thing. So rapid intensification. So that's something we'll have to watch this season.
I know on last week's show, we had a soundbite from Ken Graham, and if I recall the statistic he shared during the news conference, it was every Category 5 storm we've seen was a tropical depression 3 days prior.
Yeah.
That rapid intensification stat really hit us over the head.
It's wild.
Yeah. So let me ask you, you're on the broadcast side of things now as a public communicator, but you've spent time at the National Hurricane Center. What type of confidence can the public expect out of something like the annual National Hurricane Center Hurricane Outlook?
In what was put out this May, going into the season? Yeah. I think the forecasters are putting in every bit of effort they would put into the forecast in any season. So I have the utmost confidence in the forecasters within the Weather Service and at NOAA. The concern, obviously, are the recent the cuts, but also the downsizing of the staffing within the Weather Service. It's not, this is the first time in I don't even know how long the Weather Service had fewer than 4,000 personnel, and fully staffed. They look at about they should be about 5,000. But it's not that we lost people. We lost really experienced people to early resignations and that sort of thing. And when you lose that experience, it worries you a little bit. Just not the folks that
decades of experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's the numbers that they've used are, they lost a decade of staffing in 3 months at the Weather Service. It's a pretty serious thing, and I keep in touch with my colleagues and friends at the Weather Service in NOAA, and because of our conversations that we've had, I've felt compelled to write about this and talk about this and use my mouthpiece in the media to try to explain to people how severe these are and the potential it has in terms of affecting the forecasts and the information and the data that we get during the hurricane season. And I think that's the at the end of the day, that's the concern everybody has, is there's a lot that we don't know. And I think that's the worrying part about all of this is, what is going to be affected. We can sort of look out and say, well, these programs are going to, have some cuts, and, we're not going to have the staffing, but I don't think we necessarily know until we get there for a lot of this.
Yeah, I think you're in a unique position with somebody who has NOAA experience, but now is on the broadcast side, because we know a lot of government workers, probably rightfully so, in different sectors of the government are hesitant to speak out in order to protect their own jobs. And you wrote on Substack that many local National Weather Service offices across the country are on life support, was how you described it. And as we've talked about here on the show, there have been reductions in staff, with some of them now not operating 24 hours a day. As somebody who has worked in the Weather Service, what is that like, having these gaps?
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, the Weather Service was understaffed going into this year before all of this stuff happened with these cuts and these reductions. And when the Weather Service is having to effectively not have a forecaster on the desk for hours of the day, even if it's during quiet weather, that's something that that's mission critical type work that they're doing. And so the only reason they would be doing that is that they're at critical staffing levels, and not, sending up the balloons twice a day in many of these offices, and not collecting those critical data points. And, even more worrisome is what may lie ahead in terms of the cuts to NOAA and the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research and OAR. There's a lot of stuff that we use, a lot of tools that we rely on as hurricane forecasters that we may not have access to if they don't have a budget, if they don't have money to fund these cooperative institutes like SIMS that are critical. HRD and AOML in Miami, the Hurricane Research Division, is funded through OAR. The support that is provided to the hurricane hunters that help them fly, the mission critical support to the hurricane hunters, the scientists that are on the plane, that are on the ground, scientists that are getting the data points from the hurricane hunters into the hurricane models, like HAFs, are only skilled, really, intensity models that we have. If they're not being funded, then that data is not getting into the models. The models themselves aren't being updated. Even if the models exist, if we're not updating the physics, then they become less useful for us and less reliable. So I mean, these are real things. I mean, the detailed budget came out last Friday, and it zeroed out OAR. And if we don't have the funding for OAR, we're going to lose a lot of these. They're classified as research projects, but we use them operationally. We use the drones, we use the dropsondes, even though they're research endeavors. We do use them operationally to decipher, how strong a hurricane is, and putting that data into the model improves the forecast.
You mentioned weather balloons. I know we've talked about it here on the show, and I think our audience, for the most part, probably understands the importance of them. But for anybody who maybe is unfamiliar with the value of just that one tool in and of itself, it almost sounds elementary or rudimentary. Oh, we launch balloons up into the sky. But like, Michael, what type of importance does any one of those data sets have in the big picture?
It's the whole butterfly effect. If you don't, it may not seem that a balloon launch in Oregon would matter for a hurricane forecast along the Gulf Coast, but it absolutely does because of the downstream implications. And a lot of this we're going to kind of test in real time. I mean, hopefully, we did see that the Weather Service got some permission to hire at least some new forecasters. So maybe we can start filling those holes in terms of the balloon launches. But it'll certainly degrade the forecast if you're, right now I think it's 15-20% of balloon launches compared to where we were 3 or 4 months ago. But not getting those balloon launches in the models. Every hurricane season we see it, right? With the models they're windshield wipering back and forth in terms of the track, and then so the Weather Service offices will put out supplement the balloon launches. Instead of having 2 launches a day, they'll have 4 launches a day, and we put those data in the model. We get the hurricane owners out there. We try to get more data in from the hurricane reconnaissance planes, and you put the data into those models, and you see the models settle down a little bit. And that's really important to give the forecasters confidence in the forecast that they're putting out, is to not have the volatility that we see in the models. And that's where the importance of the data comes in.
Yeah, I put it on the screen as you mentioned it. There was some reporting out this week. This is the CNN article, which, as you noted, reads, after losing more than 560 employees to layoffs and early retirement incentives earlier this year, the National Weather Service has received permission to hire about 125 new meteorologists and specialists for its forecast offices around the country, sources tell CNN. So, as you mentioned, some of those gaps will be filled, but I think there's probably still a question of what about the other positions and what about the years of experience that maybe went missing. Yeah.
And they are going to try to move some folks around as if they can within NOAA. It's kind of shuffling folks in, but maybe filling particularly some of the management positions. And these offices like Houston now has been reported on. Houston is without its entire management team, so getting those managers in there, for the start of the hurricane season, or at least for the beginning parts of the hurricane season.
Yeah, I know we're missing a meteorologist in charge in Columbia, South Carolina, too. Let me go over to Sam Walker on the Outer Banks. Sam?
Well, is this where do these people go? And the reason I bring that up is this trying to shift some of this into the private industry, the private weather industry? Is that part of that? I mean, where exactly are we, this talent drain that's happening in the National Weather Service? I mean, these are people who are specifically trained for some pretty specific tasks. I mean, are we going to see them going into the private industry side?
It's a good question, Sam. I think the folks that have recently retired, I've spoken to a lot of them. Some of them are struggling and to know what is next for them. I think for a lot of them, I think the uncertainty of, what's going to happen with the Weather Service. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my benefits? Am I going to lose my health insurance? In order to hold on to that, a lot of them just decided, hey, I'm going to retire early, but I'm not really ready for retirement. I'm maybe 5-10 years away to the point of where I would want to be retired. And so a lot of them are kind of looking at what is that next opportunity. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where these talented individuals end up going. And it's the conversations are difficult to have with friends that I've known for a long time. These people, I have a colleague of mine who was in the Weather Service for over almost 25 years, and talked to them. They were actually laid off in the probationary cuts. They had received a promotion, and as part of that promotion, they were put on a probation, and they were terminated just because of their status. But they were very high up in the Weather Service, and they were mad. They were very, very mad about this.
I want to ask you, because I want to make sure I understand what you just said, because this was one of the questions I had as somebody who's never worked in the government. Probationary employee could be somebody who's brand new, very green, new to the sector, but also would be somebody who got transferred or got promoted and was in
Correct.
a new role, despite how many years of experience they had with the government.
Correct. Yeah. So the majority of the probationary cuts were people who were recently hired, but you had more than a handful of people who were career weather service employees who had been there long enough to where they could almost, retire if they chose to, and had been recently promoted. And because of that promotion, were put into a probationary status for a year. It's sort of a thing that they do for, like you said, for some of the transfers and some of the promotions, and for most new hires. It doesn't mean they did anything wrong. It's just an evaluation period. But because of that, it was sort of in mass that those people who were in that probationary status were let go. So that's a hard thing for somebody who gave their whole working career to the Weather Service. And this person told me in confidence that even if they were offered their job back, they wouldn't take it. They were angry, very, very angry about this.
I've wondered that. I don't know, it's probably impossible to paint a broad stroke across the whole board, but I have wondered about that exact, if this was me, how would I feel?
Yeah. And I've had just a lot of listening sessions with people because, but not everybody's that way. I mean, I've talked to some people who said, look, I saw this as an opportunity. It was an opportunity for me to retire, to have, my health insurance, and to do something new and different. And they're excited, maybe a little nervous, but excited to try something different on the private side, whether that's doing their own business, starting their own business, or working for a private group. Those are opportunities they're exploring. So it'll be a tough time for meteorologists, especially coming into the industry, because there are fewer jobs on the public side, and then there's more competition from people who recently left the public side.
Yeah, and if you think about it, we've seen this in the broadcast industry with everybody, with all the cutbacks that we've seen, especially on the radio side, which I came up in, and with automation. There's another aspect of this, losing this talent drain at the same time. The National Weather Service produces so much, and NOAA itself produces so much of the data that we use, radio, TV, all these different places. There's not really somewhere that does that, is there? I mean, there really isn't, some private company that's doing the exact same thing the National Weather Service does when it comes to the deep forecasting stuff, the stuff that you guys use to write the forecast, all that stuff.
I don't know, how you all feel. In talking to a lot of even weather savvy people, I don't think they realize how much of the information that we get as private sector meteorologists are from the government, or from taxpayer money. The data that we use regularly comes from the Weather Service and comes from NOAA. It's the data part that's really critical, because it's hurting, without those data streams, it hurts all of us. And it's really hard to replicate that on the private side. If it was a cost-effective thing, if it was a profitable thing that the private sector could do and do it better, they would have done it, and they haven't done it. And so I don't think it's something that, the private side can replace easily. And I think just generally, one of the most important things that we have as an enterprise is a unified, inconsistent message. And if every private company has their own forecast, and we don't have a national weather service with a public forecast that we're all singing off the same page of music, then which forecast do people choose when they're deciding whether or not they're going to evacuate ahead of a hurricane? I'm a big believer in anything that I show in terms of forecast information. It's the government federal official forecast. And even if I have some disagreement, there are times when I say, well, maybe I would do this or do that, but I don't think that's good for the message. I can talk a little bit about scenarios and talk about uncertainties in the forecast, but at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the public has the confidence in the forecast to make the decisions, rather than, well, this forecast says this forecast says that, and I feel frozen. I don't know what to do. Do I make this decision? How do I make this decision? And that's something I worry about if we have a bunch of different private forecasts that are using different data streams, different data sources.
Let me go over to Frank in Columbia. Frank, we mentioned that the Columbia National Weather Service office, as best as we understand it, is one of those offices with a staff shortage. And, just because they're inland doesn't mean that they're not impacted by hurricane season.
Absolutely. For example, last year with Helene, the highest winds that we saw in South Carolina occurred in Columbia's county warning area. And it's something to think about, not just if you're in Columbia's area or another inland weather service office that's dealing with shorthanded. It could be someplace out west that or in the plains that's dealing with severe weather this time of year. If they're shorthanded, they're going to struggle to cover the severe weather outbreaks that occur this time of year. During the peak of hurricane season, not just the coastal offices, but the inland offices will have to deal with inland hurricanes. And it may be like, for example, here in the middle of South Carolina, Beryl in 1994, it was a tropical storm that made landfall in the Florida Panhandle, but it caused a bunch of tornadoes here in South Carolina, including an F3 that was 15 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So the short staff situation doesn't just apply to the coastal offices; it applies to the inland ones too, and any severely short-staffed office around the country.
Michael, as we look at video here from Helene and we digest Frank's good advice about the wide reach of tropical systems, you ended your blog post by telling your readers to be ready for your one. What advice do you have for folks who might have hurricane fatigue or maybe live in one of these areas who haven't seen a hurricane in decades?
I think Frank is spot on. What he's saying is that we often think of hurricanes as a coastal event, but if we learned anything last year is that they're not only coastal events, and they affect areas. It can affect areas hundreds of miles inland. This is not, what happened in North Carolina, as horrific as it is, has happened in other places over the years. Camille had as many deaths inland in parts of Virginia than it did at the coast when it made, after it made landfall in 1969. So the reality of it is even when you're far inland, is to pay attention to these forecasts. These are oftentimes potentially catastrophic events. And we see this year in and year out, but I mean, it was an extreme, obviously, this hurricane season. One of the stats that I thought was most remarkable about Helene is that it had more deaths from wind than any tropical cyclone going back to the 1960s on record. There were so many of those inland deaths from trees falling on houses and such. And a lot of that gets lost when we're hyper focused on the coast. In the case of Helene, there was very strong messaging from the inland office. You guys know this better than anybody, but I think people, if you've never seen it or experienced it, it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other for a lot of people. And those are the stories we heard from folks on the ground in North Carolina. Everybody said, and you hear this after a hurricane, but everybody said, I never thought it would be this bad.
I have redefined what catastrophic means after this event, because I heard that going in, and I don't even think I fathomed what that meant in terms of what we are actually seeing playing out on our video feed here for those watching along with us. There was something in your blog post that I had never heard of before. You live in Florida, and you mentioned a preparedness tax holiday. In the Carolinas, we still have in South Carolina, Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, like a back to school tax-free weekend. Is it kind of the same idea, but for hurricane season, Michael?
That's it. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because the state has not passed their budget yet. So they don't have, for this hurricane season, they haven't announced the dates, the weeks for this disaster tax-free holiday that they have on disaster preparedness items. But this is something they've done most years, especially in recent years. They've had 2 week-long sales tax holidays for disaster-related items. So it could be anything from batteries to generators, where if you buy it during certain weeks, and usually it's sort of on the front end of the hurricane season, and they'll put one in the middle of the hurricane season. So I don't know, it's like August, or can't remember when the second tax holiday week was last year, but it was like maybe August or September. And so you go out and you can buy your certain items up to a certain amount. I mean, even generators, I think it's up to, last year was up to $3,000 or more dollars, and
Wow.
it's a decent savings for folks,
Yeah.
when you're spending that much money. It's a good opportunity to go out and buy the things you might need for hurricane season and save some money while you're at it. I think it's a good program.
Wasn't even a thing I knew I should be advocating for.
Yeah.
I learned something new. Frank or Sam, any other questions for Michael?
Well, Michael, it's interesting. We talked about things away from the coast about this tonight, but at the same time, you're in Miami. I'm on the Outer Banks. I have some connections in Melbourne with some radio stations there. I do some news for every now and then. And one thing that we have really become emphasizing on is one of the risks from hurricane season is distant storms and rip currents and the number of deaths that we see, and trying to get that messaging not to just to the coast, but trying to get that message inland over the years about rip current safety, especially associated with tropical cyclones. And it's interesting to see where our messaging has gone over the last couple of years. We just had Rip Current Awareness Week here in the Carolinas for the first time. Florida, I see rip current deaths on a kind of a regular basis, but I don't know. Are you guys doing the same type of messaging, the same type of education that we're trying to do up here?
Yeah, totally. Rip currents has always been a topic and an issue and a hazard that's near and dear to me. When I was at the Weather Channel, we partnered with the National Ocean Service to try to bring more information to air on rip currents, to have more graphics that spoke about the hazard, more explainers to sort of explain to people what a rip current is, how a rip current works. I think the general idea, you hear the misnomers of undertows and that sort of thing with rip currents, but I think hitting on rip currents, that they're not just a feature of a hurricane as a storm is hitting, but as you know, rip currents are often worst in the immediate days after a hurricane hits. So hurricane hits, and then you have these channels that are carved out in the sandbars, and a hurricane leaves, and then the sun comes back and people want to go to the beach. Well, in the days after a hurricane, you see terrible rip currents and people jumping back in the water because it's summer, and a lot of people just kind of want to get back to some sort of normalcy. And then you see all these deaths that happen from rip currents right after a hurricane, because people are like, oh, the storm's gone, the water's not as choppy, and they jump in. So I think that's just something that we try to hit on and remind folks that this is a constant problem throughout the summer, that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, I'd like to see that it's gotten better, but I don't think it has in terms of the deaths that we're seeing from rip currents. So we have some work to do.
Yeah, definitely. And you talked about, in the days after a storm that comes close. I mean, we've had so many incidents out here when we've had a hurricane that was 1,000 miles offshore, and it's, 85 degrees and sunny. And those are when we've had our worst incidents of injuries, deaths, incidents, rescues. That seems to be something we've tried to emphasize in our electronic media. Our Visitors Bureau out here trying to emphasize it with, and not, when I say inland, I'm talking about Pittsburgh and Columbus and Philadelphia and, where our markets come from, where our visitors come from, trying to educate them. At the same time, we're trying to educate some of our residents still, and our new residents out here as well.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've shown graphics related to rip currents. We have a hurricane that's the middle of the Atlantic, and I'm making graphics that are showing the rip current risk to us in South Florida. So yeah, I totally hear you on that. And I was glad to see that the Hurricane Center this year now has a rip current graphic that they will have available for their forecast, which is a new product for this hurricane season.
Yeah, lots of like primary and secondary impacts of hurricanes near and far. Michael, as we wrap things up, I guess my last question to you is, how are you feeling about this hurricane season?
Well, I'm a worrier. So it's in my, I always think of the worst case, and I worry about Southeast Florida. It's been a long time since the urban corridor of Miami and Broward counties and Fort Lauderdale have seen a bona fide hurricane. And there's been a lot of build up in the infrastructure, but we also have a lot of old building stock. A lot of the buildings that were, people we talk a lot about Andrew and how the building codes have are very strict in the wake of Andrew, but there are still a lot of buildings. Remember, Andrew really hit South Dade and Homestead. So there are a lot of areas of Miami and particularly up into Broward counties that weren't devastated like we saw in parts of South Dade. And so I worry about when things turn around and what they've seen along the Gulf Coast happens to us in Southeast Florida. 20 years since we've had a hurricane impact in Miami and in Broward counties. We had Irma. That was a pretty devastating event in 2017 for the Keys. But it's been 20 years since we've had hurricane winds in Miami and Broward counties. That's remarkable. It's remarkable. So it's only a matter of time before it happens. I'm not looking forward to it.
All preparing for our next one whenever it comes. Not an if, but when.
That's it. You got it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, we appreciate your time. If our Carolina audience finds themselves in Miami, I hope they check you out there in WPLG. If not, they can find you on your Substack. Do you want to go ahead and let people know where they can find you online?
Yeah, so all of my handles on social medias are Michael R. I use my middle initial just because there are other Michael Lowrys out there. Lowry, Lowry. So that is my Substack. I'm most active on sort of the newsy places. So you can find me on X. You can find me on Blue Sky now. A lot of the scientists have gone over to Blue Sky. And then on my Substack that I publish a daily newsletter. I put a lot into that newsletter. It sort of sets the tone for the day. It helps me. I'm up at 5 a.m. I'm up usually through the night checking the models, and it's something I try to put a lot of information into so that people can kind of get up and get the lay of the land on what's going on in the tropics. Even for people who aren't in South Florida. If you're in South Florida, obviously, you can find me every day on WPLG TV. It's the ABC affiliate here in Miami and South Florida.
Substack, I feel like, is one of 2025's like top social networks or something. I'm like, do we need a Substack, guys? Is this a thing now?
It's, you only have so many hours in the day. You guys know this. Like, I can't be on every, I have an Instagram, but I just I can't. There's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Hopefully we get a chance to check in with you during the hurricane season, and hopefully it's calm and quiet. And
yes, no, I hope the Carolina Weather Group is not having to talk a lot about hurricanes this year, but it's always great to be with you guys. Kind of an annual rite of passage to be on the show. So it's great to see you.
We appreciate your time. We're going to play our game called Too Many Tabs. You're welcome to stick around, but you also get up at 5 a.m. So if you want to run, we totally understand.
No, I'll stick around. I'll hang out.
Okay.
Is that okay?
All right. So that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I'm going to formally end our interview by thanking Chevy Blue for the $9.99 super chat that came in during the interview, and also giving thanks here to Michael. As the name might suggest, the game Too Many Tabs is literally just all of the things we want to say on the show.
Yeah.
But are really just bullet points at this point. So let me start on my screen, and then that'll give you guys time if you want to pull anything up. Here's what I've got. New imagery, as we've been doing here on the Carolina Weather Group. We want to keep our finger on the pulse when it comes to Hurricane Helene recovery. New images tonight from Logan Stewart, spokesperson for Duke Energy, showing crews and from Duke Energy and also the NCDOT making repairs in the Chimney Rock area. They're moving poles today, utility poles, to help get these areas, yes, reconnected to infrastructure all these months later. Many roads still needing to be rebuilt. We know right after the storm, we saw imagery of them using helicopters to bring in poles. So still a lot of work happening there. I'm going to go to next one of the tabs I got. We mentioned earlier in the show the severe storms that we had last Friday. We brought you those live on the Carolina Weather Group YouTube channel. The National Weather Service in Columbia did some storm surveys. They did confirm some continuous straight line wind damage from storms near Swansea with maximum wind speeds of 90 miles per hour. Michael, that's like a hurricane.
Wow. It is like a hurricane. You got that right. Yeah.
That's about the same as the April 20th of 2024 storm up in Rock Hill.
Oh, yes. How I can't believe that was that long ago. And the National Weather Service also confirmed an EF1 tornado in Clarendon County. And that had winds also of 90 miles an hour. And we had a very, very brief tornado in York County. It was limited to like one person's backyard. High impact for that one person. But I will just include that one verbally. But this is what, if you guys missed it, this is what some of those thunderstorm winds were like. This is a video we got from Myrtle Beach and you can actually see it here on the screen. Gosh, we've never had this happen before, not even in a hurricane. That's what some of these thunderstorms felt like. Now, there were some folks like myself who barely got a drop of rain. They were so scattered across the Carolinas. It was literally a feast or a famine, but winds were ripping in some places. We did not see the aurora in the Carolinas this week. We had, was that Saturday night? A brief glimmer of optimism after a solar flare. We were told that the radiation was coming, and it did, but it just peaked a little bit too early for us here in the United States to get a good show. And as I understand it, a lot of the folks who were maybe in the northern part of the U.S. who maybe would have had a chance to see it were obscured by clouds and smoke from wildfires and the like. So that certainly, I think we got spoiled after, was that last year?
Oh, yeah, it was 2024, right? Mayish? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so, right?
I remember
what is
this
time?
Because we were, we had aurora sightings all the way down to the Keys, which is nuts.
That is insane.
And I was with my family out in California that week, and I was so jealous. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Of all the weeks for me to be in California, this is not the week.
I have some pictures from here in Charlotte where I have to contend with trees and urban lighting, long-term exposure, and it's like very faint. But I know like in Western North Carolina mountains or probably out by you, Sam, it was probably gorgeous.
Yeah, October. That's when it was. We had October's when we had that.
October 24?
Yeah, October 8th, 2024. October 7th and 8th. I've got looking at a story right now. I'm on samwalkerobxnews.com when I got it, which was just
that's a good website.
Yeah, thank you. What we saw was more that pink haze, and you really had to do a long exposure, but it was visible naked eye if you knew what to look at. And especially Hatteras Island, Ocracoke Island, which are so dark and such a great place to go for sky watching any time of year. Even on a hazy time, even when it's hazy in the summer, it's still just spectacular. But the winter is just amazing. You could see it with a naked eye.
Yeah.
But I was hoping we would get it, but alas, as you said, I think some of the smoke had something to do with, even if we had the timing, I think there was enough smoke in the upper atmosphere, and we've really seen it out here the last 2 days. I mean, it's just been an orange morning and afternoon, morning from like about, sunrise until about 10, and then about 4 hours before sunset. It's just this like orange, like golden hour. We always talk about golden hour. It's been like golden 4 hours on both sides.
Yeah. We know that the air quality has been impacted. Here's a look at Air Now, the EPA website, and especially up north. But yeah, as you guys mentioned, it's creeping down all the way down to where Michael is in Florida. Air quality problems.
Yeah, we have dust, and we got this wildfire smoke. It's a mess right now.
Yeah, I was interested in the Saharan dust cloud. I mean, we could go back to our tropical discussions about that. That, how much of an impact does that play? I mean, we thought maybe last year that was what played into that lull we had in July and August was something to do with the Saharan dust cloud. And talk a little bit more about what that means for you guys, especially down there, like you talked about, is how visible it is.
Yeah, we in fact, there's a paper I'm working on with other folks about the mid-season lull. It's going through review right now, but the dust is part of that. But yeah, the dust is always an interesting discussion, and there's always kind of a back and forth on how it plays into the hurricane season. At the end of the day, though, the dust is it peaks in kind of late June, early July-ish, and we have these we have a really big outbreak right now. In fact, I went to go download a bunch of the dust data just to kind of see where this all stands. But I think the problem with the dust is it typically drops off really quickly right as we get into the peak of the season. So it becomes less of a big player for August, September, and October. But at least right now, I do think it is helping to keep things pretty quiet. So.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything.
Yeah. I actually I keep a jar of Saharan dust on my desk. This is dust I picked up from the Sahara myself and brought back. Somehow got through all of the security stuff with this dust. I had to label it because I've kept it on my desk now for many years. I had it on my desk at the Weather Channel, but people would come to my desk and they didn't know what it was, and they would open it and just start smelling it.
Humans are weird.
It's weird. I don't know. They wouldn't even ask. They would just pick up the dust, the jar, and smell it. So I said, well, let me label this. But
I'm relieved.
It is very red. It is extremely red. I don't know if you can see that, but
yeah.
Anyway.
I'm relieved to hear that you picked it up in person and didn't capture it out of the sky and dry it out.
Well, yeah. We did some camping in the Sahara, so
wow,
that was an interesting experience. Yeah,
I suddenly have 27 questions about that.
I know.
Yeah, well.
Did it come in a sea breeze thunderstorm down there, and thus was the Sahara mud layer instead of the Saharan air layer?
Yeah. Thankfully, we went in December. It was beautiful, man. It was absolutely stunning. But it was you have to get out there by camel. It's hours on camels, and yeah, it's a whole thing. We were way out there.
I'm gonna be lucky if I get my kids to like Wilmington.
Every year for our hurricane special is like going out to the Sahara and doing something over there, but station never goes for it. I don't know why.
Why they don't have the budget for it?
We try.
We can try. Yeah. We desperately want to get out to Frying Pan Shoals off the coast of the Carolinas. That's where, yeah. If anybody knows a person with a checkbook, let us know. Frank, you got some tabs for us? Too many tabs?
I have drought tabs, James.
Drought tabs. You have an abundance of drought tabs?
Yes, well, 2.
Yeah.
I ought to show Florida too, since in honor of our guest. But at the moment, I only have South Carolina and North Carolina. Thanks to recent rains, we're in much better shape now in South Carolina. Much of the state is out of drought, the exception being parts of Charleston and Georgetown and all of Georgetown and almost all of Horry County. And a little bit of Berkeley County too, still in drought conditions, and some of that still at D2. Rain today and tonight will help with that. Some shower activity tomorrow, and then likely again Friday and Saturday with the severe risk. Hopefully, will continue to wear down this drought area in South Carolina. North Carolina, which I haven't looked at very carefully, but not surprised to see that most of North Carolina is out of drought as well. Still a lot of dry areas, and the Sam Walker zone out there is still in level D1, and the drought that's in parts of the PD region of South Carolina extends into southeastern North Carolina too. So there's still some drought, but we've had good rain recently, and prospects for rain over the short term are pretty good as well. So hopefully we can continue to improve the drought situation here in the Carolinas.
I think it's interesting. I was going to say, I think it's interesting the fact that where the highest amount of drought in both states happens to also be where much of our wildfire activity occurs.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
You know, it especially when you look at it here in North Carolina, can be called the Albemarle Pamlico Peninsula. We've never come up with a cool name for that part of the state.
I like Sam Walker Zone.
I'll take it. Well, that would be the far northeast corner. You know, way up there in that, way up there, we're South Virginia is what we are. No, if you look at that, what we call it the mainland is just the easiest way to put it. But when you see Hyde County, Dare County, Terrell County, Washington County, and you've got 3 wildlife refuges there that are prone to burn. And I thought it was interesting when you go back, Frank, to the South Carolina map, just west of Myrtle Beach and Conway, and those areas are in D2 right now. And what we just come out of all those wildfires back in the winter. So it's interesting to see that the coastal areas, the Pocosin, the peat that loves to burn when it gets struck by lightning, when it's dry like this. It's, these are the areas that we're in the drought right now, and that can, and it usually takes, what does it usually take to put them out? A hurricane.
Yeah, hurricane or some other big rain event. Yeah,
or a snowstorm, a rare snowstorm. So yeah, it's interesting to see that those are areas that are still in the highest amount of drought here in North Carolina and South Carolina.
And there's Florida for Michael.
and then we'll go into Florida, which is a totally different animal.
I'll be interested to see next week, because we have had a deluge this week in South Florida. We've had flooding issues, and anyway, we may have made a little bit of a dent, but yeah, it's a mess down here.
Yeah, y'all have been real dry down there, especially Southwest Florida.
Yeah, it's weirdly dry. It's been a weird winter for us. Really in the spring. But yeah.
And again, there's an example of, if you look at that swath in north central Florida from Jackson, from roughly Daytona down towards Orlando and towards the north side of Tampa, that's a big wildfire area right through there.
And then down into the Everglades, we have brush fire issues frequently down there.
Yeah, and my other tab is self-study I've been doing on the Atlantic equatorial mode, aka Atlantic Niño Niña. I brought it up because it looks like we have a cold phase of that getting underway, and interesting to see how that affects the upcoming hurricane season.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last year. I think it's an interesting thing that we're talking more about lately.
Interesting. So many different little things to look at and trying to determine. What does Brad Panovich always say when he's forecasting winter and snow, like the Sierra Desert or something? And I'm like, oh, okay.
The butterfly effect.
The butterfly effect, yeah. As we wrap things up, Michael, how do you feel about AI?
That's another. I feel like you're bringing up a lot of topics I've been reading about lately. There is a whole. There is a listserv with all of the kind of tropical folks that some of you may be on, but there's a long thread about the AI models and hurricane forecasting, and it's interesting. I think there's a lot of promise in the AI world I'm talking very specifically about hurricanes. Okay. On the track side and on the Genesis side. But we got a long ways to go for using AI for intensity forecasting. But, we'll get there at some point.
Have you ever asked ChatGPT what you look like?
I haven't.
I didn't intend to ask it, but I asked it to create a YouTube thumbnail for tonight's show, and I just gave it your name. I didn't give it your picture. I wasn't even trying to violate your right to your own self-image, but it just took it upon itself to generate what it thinks you look like. And so this is what it stuck out. I don't know why. It's not bad.
It's not far off. It could be worse. Right?
Yeah.
Well, then I said, all right, give me a second option, and it gave me this guy.
Okay, all right.
So I don't know. Is that one of the other Michael Lowrys? Our
could be.
Lowry? Yeah,
it could be. Yeah.
Why does the first one remind me of a billboard on I-95 for legal services in Florida?
Yeah, all you need is a phone number, 222-2222.
Yeah.
I'm also your accountant as well.
Right.
Yeah, that too.
That is really funny.
I don't. There's no rhyme or reason. Why does the text hang off the side of the graphic? I don't know.
Yeah.
You didn't want to read it, did you?
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the 1 hour mark. We're going to leave it there. But thank you for your insights. I look forward to reading more of your Substack. And as we mentioned, we hope things remain quiet and calm. We talked about space weather during the show. We're hoping to catch up with our friend Tony Rice in the weeks ahead to find out all the latest and greatest about space. So do get subscribed, and we'll keep an eye on the severe weather threat here in the Carolinas for Saturday. But until then, I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. On behalf of Frank Strait in Columbia, Sam Walker in the Sam Walker Zone, and Michael Lowry down in Florida. We hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you, guys. Good night.